Shalom from Israel, I'm Ariel Ben Abraham. This week we're going to reflect on chapter 9 of the book of Psalms by King David. Let's start now, verse 1. We said last week that David is addressing God as the creator of everything, the majesty of his name in all the earth, the mindfulness of God about us, how to be so mindful considering that there's sun, moon, stars, but yet he is mindful about man. He crowned man a little less than angels in order to rule over his material creation. And then in that's chapter 8. Now in chapter 9, let's take this chapter 8 as an introduction for what David has to say to God, which is, I will thank you, Lord, with all my heart. I will tell of all your wonderful deeds. I will be glad and rejoice in you. I will sing the praises of your name, O Most High. So this verse 1 and 2. David first thanks God. We have to be thankful just by being, breathing at this moment, just by being his creation, his creatures. That's enough for us to be thankful every moment. The fact that we are alive, the fact that he gave us life, we have to be grateful. With all our hearts, as David is saying, with all levels of consciousness, in our thoughts, in our discernment, in our intellect, in our emotions, in our feelings, in our passions, even with our instincts, we have to love God. We have to thank him for this wonderful gift of being alive, being his creation. And then we narrate his wonderful deeds. It's like not just that you created me and I'm grateful for that, but I have to praise all that you have done. The trees, the food, the animals, mountains, rivers, sun, stars, everything. So we have to praise him for all these wonderful deeds. And we have to be glad and rejoice in God. So we have to be happy for this. This is not just a simple fact that we have to solemnly say, God, we thank you, you give us life. We have to be happy about this. This is essential. I will sing the praises of your name, O Most High. We were referring before that the name is what we see in creation from God. That's the name of God. His works. It's very, very, very essential. Then after this introduction, very important, verse 3, my enemies turn back. They stumble and perish before you. Why? David is in a position of bonding with God. All these verses that we mentioned, chapter 8 and now, David is bonding with God. And in this bonding, there are no enemies. Why? Because we are with God. He will say later in one of his Psalms, if God is with me, who could be against? So that's another way to say the same. My enemies turn back, they stumble and perish before you. When we are bonding with the goodness, love's ways and attributes, all this loving kindness, truth, grace, all these godly attributes that are a common bond with him, there's nothing different than that. There's no enemies, there's no opposition, there's nothing to fight against us because we are in goodness. Let's try to assimilate this, because we complain all the time about negative situation and negative thinking and negative doing and negative things that happens to us. But then we don't find that goodness is the other side. It's the exit. It's the redemption. And then once we are in goodness, we don't remain in goodness. At some point we fall back again into the negative patterns. So why don't we keep going, holding this consciousness all the time? It's difficult. Because we have entrenched in our consciousness good and evil in order to choose good all the time. So these negative things that happen to us are references to choose all the opposite all the time. So they're there for a reason. So instead of renegating about all our negative tendencies and traits in consciousness and our lust and our envy and our greed and our coveting and our indifference, arrogance and all these things, try to go to the other side. Those are references to go to the other side, to the positive ones. So, verse 4, you have upheld my right and my cause. It's like our right and our cause, our purpose. When it's with God, when we are bonding with Him, with these positive traits and trends in consciousness, He's holding us strong with these positive qualities. Because these are qualities of God, what we see reflected in His creation, the goodness. So He's inviting us, look the goodness that I have created for you. So be good. It's loud and clear. We have to be deaf and blind not to see this. It's evident. Sitting enthroned as the righteous judge. Yeah, He's in a throne. He's leading His creation. His creation belongs to Him. He sustains His creation. He's feeding us every moment. As a righteous judge, this is the good. The righteousness in this case, we're talking about goodness. We have referred this many times in our blog and in these videos. Now, when we're talking about righteousness and justice, we're talking about making goodness prevail. That's why we pursue injustice. When we go to a court trial, what is the whole point of justice? To make truth, the truth prevail. And goodness prevail. So the wicked are to be punished, and the innocent have to be exempt, spare. So goodness is the whole purpose of this righteous God. It's goodness. So it's not a judge that is saying, I'm going to judge you for this. No. This is about goodness, making goodness prevail. That's the way we have to understand the righteousness of God. And God as a judge. To judge is implementing righteousness, goodness, in every aspect of consciousness and every facet of life. Verse 5, you have rebuked the nations and destroyed the wicked. You have blotted out their name forever and ever. Verse 5. This rebuking is interesting because he could have said, God have destroyed the nations. Like, if it's something negative, destroy. No, it's a rebuke. We rebuke our negative tendencies in consciousness. It's a rebuke. Why? Because they're there for a function. So we're saying, instead of having these negative trends and tendencies in consciousness, let's do the positive ones. That's the rebuke. So this is not about destroying ego. This is not about destroying our sense of pride or our sense of lust or our sense of coveting or greed or this kind of thing. It's to put them in the right direction. It's lust for God's knowledge. Let's be proud about the good things we do in order to do more good things. Let's envy this in order to pursue, not to envy. Like to acquire goodness. The goodness of what we don't have that we see in others. So what we envy in them, we have to start implementing it on us. So this is the rebuke. So when we feel envy, it's a rebuke to a goodness. Like, what's going on here? This is a fight. It's like, why am I coveting this? What is the sense of lack? What is that I don't have that I decided that I need to get it? What is it? It's a rebuke. So we have to understand that in that context. You have rebuked the nation and destroyed the wicked. It's a process. Once we do the rebuke, then we destroy what is evil, meaning we eliminate what is negative in our consciousness in order to pursue goodness. You have blotted out their name forever and ever. This is a phrase for the Messianic era, when we don't want to have anything negative in our consciousness. And it's interesting because it's in past tense, meaning that God decreed that long time ago. So it's our choice then. Not to make a choice. This is essential. Yeah, you have blotted out their name forever and ever. That's the rest of the eternal. In other words, these things are temporary. This is the lesson here. That everything negative that we have in consciousness is extremely temporary. It will not last forever. It says here. And our prophets echo these words. And it's in the Torah also. At the end, good is the one that is going to prevail. Life, not death. Love's ways and attributes, not egos, fantasies, and illusions. So this is a messianic statement. Messianic in terms of the Messianic era, the final redemption, according to Judaism. Verse 6, endless ruin have overtaken my enemies. It's making echo of the same thing. The negative traits in consciousness, all the wickedness is going to be removed, then as well as the enemies of goodness. You have uprooted their cities. Cities, in this case, we have referred this many times in the blog and here in these videos. Mountains, cities, things that are hard to move or well established. We're talking about principles. We're talking about habits. We're talking about customs. We're talking about even addictions, obsessions, attachment. Those are cities. So there are positive cities and negative cities. The fortified cities, the ones that are hard to conquer, to break in them, those are the most difficult. So we're talking about this fixed idea, this stubbornness that we have about things that we need to change. So he said, you have uprooted their cities. I'm talking about the wicked people, the living cities. So these ideas, this behavior, these tendencies, these negative feelings and emotions, they come from somewhere. They come from a principle, from an idea, which is wrong, from a belief that is wrong. So David is telling us, God already took them out of our consciousness. So they're not enemies anymore. So everything is clear. The path is clear now. Even the memory of them has perished. This is messianic statement. That's the book of Psalms. Everything that is related to David, King David, in most of the Psalms and most of his life, is has to do with the future. With this idea that he's presenting in his Psalms, in his book, that goodness is prevailing and is destined to prevail. So let's never forget that. Verse 7, the Lord reigns forever. He has established his throne for judgment. And this is not for judgment, this is throne in judgment, meaning he's ruling his creation. So David is telling one of the fundamental principles of Judaism. God is in control of his entire creation. He directs it, controls it, because he made it. So this is one of them. He has established his throne for judgment, meaning he is ruling. He's making his will prevail. 8. He rules the world in righteousness and judges the people with equity. Equity is fairness. And again, we have said many times that the two aspects of God, the aspect that we see in nature, with the basic principle of what we see in nature is cause and effect. That's immutable. And this is what the fairness is about. So in other words, if we do something negative, it has consequences. So God is not punishing us. We are being punished by the consequences of our actions. So this is the fairness that he's talking about, that David is talking about here. So righteousness is, he wants goodness. if goodness is not the outcome because we are not doing goodness, the first thing to happen, what is fair to happen, is the negative consequences of our actions. So that's equity. It's like one thing is equal to the other. If we have bad thinking, bad speech, bad actions, the equity of this is probably more of the same or worse. We have to be careful about what we put in our thoughts, in our mouth, and in our doings. So 9, the Lord is a refuge for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. David is addressing situations in which we feel weak against the negative patterns in our consciousness, negative emotions, negative feelings, lower passions, negative trends and traits in consciousness. So in that sense, we are oppressed by them. What the oppressed? So the oppression is not necessarily political or social or economical or something like that. We're talking about when we are oppressed by the negative things that happen to us. So we have to think about that. So the Lord is a refuge. We're talking about the Lord. Who's the Lord? It's a place that we go and take refuge. No, we're talking about goodness here. It's exactly what we mentioned before. So when we are oppressed by negative, we know when we are oppressed by our negative things that happens to us, we know that there's a way back. There's a refuge that we always pursue to return, which is goodness. So God in this is the goodness is the refuge for those oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. In other words, when we are really inside in the depth of our problems, our suffering, our pain, that we cannot get out, we know that we can at some point. That is not going to last forever, that is temporary, as we were saying before. What is going to remain lasting forever is goodness. So let's approach the negative thing that happened to us as temporary. Because they are temporary. 10. Those who know your name trust in you. For you, Lord, have never forsaken those who seek you. We have to pursue God. We have to pursue goodness. So we're not pursuing God as an abstract old man with a long beard and this suffered face or whatever. No. Talking about goodness, the attributes, the ways and attributes of God. That's what we have to pursue. That's what we have to trust in. The good qualities, the good traits, the positive trends in consciousness. That's the name of God, as we said before. And that's our trust. We know that in goodness is our happiness, our fulfillment, our rejoice, our abundance. Then we have to, that's what we trust. We trust our goodness, our well-being, the delights that we like. We have to trust them. Of course we do. We need it. We need them. We know what they are. We pursue them. We trust in their goodness. For you, Lord, you have never forsaken those who seek you. It's like if we pursue goodness, goodness doesn't forsake us. Why? Why should love forsake? Love doesn't forsake. It's there. We have just to go back to it and be it and have it and manifest it and express it. That's the whole point. 11. Sing the praises of the Lord, enthroned in Zion. It's very important. Zion, that's why we're Zionists. We want God to reign in all His creation. We want the final redemption. We want the Messianic era. We want to rebuild Zion. We have to rebuild the temple. We have to rebuild the connection with God. The endless, eternal connection with God. how we have to remove our enemies, all who oppose the goodness of this bond, this common thing that we have with God. Sing the praises of the Lord enthroned in Zion. This is the place, this is the state of consciousness. To bond with God, to be with Him, always, permanently. Proclaim among the nations that what He has done. He has decreed His goodness. This is what we have to proclaim to all nations and to all levels of consciousness. Goodness is here to stay, to direct, to guide, to prevail. This is what He has done. The goodness that we see, that we were mentioning before in the other verses. Verse 12, for He who avenges blood remembers. God is the avenger of blood. He's the avenger of everything that is negative. It's the enemy. So we say avengers and enemy as synonyms here. My enemy, we're talking about the opposite, in contrast to the negative ways and trends in consciousness. He avenges. This is the enemy. And blood in this case is what we're losing here. The moment to moment in which we die, that's the blood. He remembers the afflicted. For He who avenges blood remembers. I mean, God's love is there all the time. It's not like to remember, it's present. We can see, we can feel it, that it's present. We just to close our eyes and realize that God's love is everywhere. So we have to let them rule every aspect of consciousness and honor His majesty and the glory of His name in all the earth. And we have to understand earth here as life, not just the planet with things also. This is very, very important. For He does not ignore the cries of the afflicted. Again, same thing. We're talking about God has compassion for His creation. But again, it's our choice. It's not He's suffering for our choices. No, we're suffering for our choices. And He's basically reminding us to choose His ways and attributes. And David is doing that. And we have to, in the first commentary, the first chapter, the introduction that we made to the book of Psalms is very important. Our sages in the Talmud says that the book of Psalms was written by divine inspiration, meaning that David was writing them by direct dictating of God. God was saying, write this down. That's why in Judaism, the book of Psalms is so important. This is the way we approach God, the way God wants us to approach Him, to understand Him, to follow Him, to bond with Him. Okay? Verse 13, Lord, see how my enemies persecute me. Have mercy and lift me up from the gates of death, that I may declare your praises in the gates of your daughter Zion, and there rejoice in your redemption. This is essential. We mentioned that a couple of chapters or 3 chapters ago, when David very smartly approaches God saying, if I'm dead because of my enemies, in other words, if I am a victim, I mean not a victim, but I'm talking about trapped in my addictions, my negative habits, my negative thinking, my attachments, my obsessions, my frustrations, my depressions, and everything negative, that I'm there, how can I praise you? How can I sing to you if I am trapped in this thing negative? Free me from the nation, free me from my enemies, and then I will praise you. So he's asking God, like, remove everything that is negative in my consciousness so I can really. This is a messianic request, by the way, messianic era request. But he was saying, rejoicing your redemption. David is asking, remove everything that is negative in my consciousness, and I will be redeemed. I will rejoice in your redemption. I will be different. It will be a different kind of approach to everything, a new perception, a new conception of everything, where everything is positive. So we cannot even imagine that, because we have the negative thinking on the side. We have this dual understanding of everything. How can one understand goodness if we don't have anything evil? A little bit, just no. Everything is going to be positive. That's real redemption. So David is asking him, see how my enemy is persecuting me. Like, all these negative traits and trends in consciousness, they don't let me be fully me. The being that you have created as good, to be good, to pursue good, for the sake of goodness. Have mercy and lift me up from the gates of death. He knows that living in this kind of a state of consciousness is being dead. It's like being dead. It is. We're not happy. We're frustrated. We are oppressed by pain, by suffering, by frustration, whatever. We can't. We're not happy. That's the gates of death. That I may declare your praises in the gates of the daughter of your daughter Sion. The daughter, again, the daughter is the extension, the result, the manifestation of our bond with God, which is Sion. That's the daughter of Sion. That's Jerusalem. It's like the manifestation of our bond with God, our oneness with God. His goodness and our goodness, His love and our love bonding. That's the expression of it. That's Jerusalem. That's the daughter of Sion. And they rejoice in your redemption. And they rejoice. Like, I can rejoice in this. Imagine just being bonded with God. How much can we rejoice? An endless rejoice. Because God is endless, is eternal. And they rejoice in your salvation, the salvation that He's giving us by allowing our consciousness, helping us remove everything negative and be with Him. Verse 15, the nations have fallen into the pit they have dug. Their feet are caught in the net they have hidden. In other words, we're trapped. I mean, the nations are the negative traits and trends in consciousness. I've fallen into the pit, meaning the predicament that they have dug, that they have created, digged in deep. Their feet are caught in the net, in the traps that they have hidden. We are trapped in our own egos, fantasies, and illusions. That traps. We know that. So that this is addressing as the nations, the negative thinking, the negative trends and trends in consciousness. Verse 16, the Lord is known by His acts of justice, by the goodness. The wicked are snared, trapped by the work of their hands. We are cause and effect. We're basically harvesting what we sow. So that's what it is. The wicked are trapped by the work of their hands. So we're trapped in our attachments, addictions, obsessions, and illusions. And they eventually may destroy us. 17. The wicked go down to the realm of the dead. Because people who are basically dead. Why? Because they don't live in the aliveness, in the life of goodness. And that is the opposite of goodness, meaning, of life meaning, the opposite of goodness. The wicked go down to the realm of the dead, or the nations that forget God. So when we have trapped in this negative, envy, coveting, greed, lust, indifference, arrogance, cruelty, indolence, these are our fall. We down to the realm of all the nations that forget God. We are forgetting the goodness. So we have to go back to God, back to goodness. 18, but God will never forget the needy. It's like even if we are weak in our problems, in our addictions, in our troubles, He doesn't forget us. He said, I'm here, just open your eyes. That's what God is telling us, just by making us, like allowing us to breathe this air that keeps us alive. He's talking to us, like, watch, open your eyes. The hope of the afflicted will never perish. We have to live with the hope. Hope not as a passive thing, but to pursue our own redemption. That's hope. So hope is not a stationary state of mind. It's the preamble, it's the certainty, the belief. In this case, we have to translate hope as belief. I hope is I believe in this, that it will happen. So in this case, hope of the afflicted will never perish. We have to believe that the goodness will prevail. 19, Arise, Lord, do not let mortals triumph. I mean, mortal, we're talking about death here. We're not talking about mortal people, like, of course, we all die. But again, this is a metaphoric way to ask God. It's like everything that is untranscendental, like that is mortal, that will decay, that will die, that will corrupt, do not let prevail. Because at some point we believe that we see so much wickedness in the planet that we say, is it possible that goodness is going to prevail? It's like, seems to be the opposite. David is doing the same reasoning here. It's like arise, it's like stand up, like manifest yourself. Like we can see you, we don't see you, you're standing. And we can see your presence revealed. That's God standing, by the way, arising. Do not let mortals triumph. Let the nations be judged in your presence. Yeah, once God's presence, the goodness is completely revealed, that all the negative things are removed. The nations will be straight up judged, conducted in the revealed presence of goodness, God's will, God's promise, God's presence. Verse 20 and last one of this chapter 9, strike them with terror. This is interesting, terror. Usually it's awness, like awesomeness. It's like made the nation is like, wow. It's not like gonna run away, I'm in terror, oh God, this is scary. No. It's the wow. Okay, that's it, I got it. I know. I will pursue goodness from now on. So it's like this is it. Strike them with terror, strike them with awesomeness. So it's like reveal yourself to them so they will know, the goodness will be so manifest in us that we will forget about anything negative eternally, forever and ever. Let the nations know that they are only mortal, meaning you are temporary. You are a reference, not a choice. The choice to be prevail is goodness. You, negative states of consciousness, are destined to disappear. But again, David is asking God, manifest yourself, arise. Meaning, manifest the goodness, your goodness, a common bond with you and I, says David. Let's manifest so the nations, all these levels of consciousness follow through in awesomeness, respect, reverence, admiration. It's like our enemies rebuke us. It's like the negative things that we do, they rebuke us, they challenge us. It's like, well, you're not good enough. We can see that. That's where we fall all the time. We seem to be weak to negative things. And we're like unable to overcome them until our goodness is strong enough to make all the negative things in our consciousness disappear. And then they will recognize when we take the step, the determination that make goodness prevail in all levels and aspects and dimensions of consciousness. Okay, so with this we finish our reflections on chapter 9 of the book of Psalms. We hope that we have contributed to expand our understanding about our permanent bond with God, which is Zion, which is the temple of Jerusalem, which is Jerusalem. Goodness and love's ways and attributes as our common bond with God and connection with God. And in this realization, we enter into the permanent goodness destined to prevail. In life, in our consciousness, and in everything, as decreed by God. So with this, we wish you an enormously abundantly blessed week. Shabbat Shalom. And until next time.